Man, what's up, everybody? I had a great Father's Day. And before I lay down and go to bed tonight, I just wanted to say, go Commanders! Go Commanders, man. Go Commanders. Raise hell, man. Take command. What you talking about?
That's Brandon Ayuk. Does he have kids?
I think he has a son.
Okay. Happy Father's Day, belated to all of you fathers out there. I had a nice Father's Day. Watched the entire golf last night. Really very riveting, unexpectedly. Wyndham Clark entered the final round at Shinnecock, 7 under par, 6 shots clear of the field. And within an hour and a half, it was a 1-shot lead. And it was really exciting on the final day. And I was very much rooting for Sam Burns, who has been close and kind of got screwed last year, if you recall, at Oakmont, when his ball was resting in water. It wasn't deemed to be a drop area because the water wasn't, according to the rules official, thick enough. He swung, splashes went everywhere. He ended up double bogeying that final next to last hole last year and losing the U.S. Open. So I was really rooting for him, and he had chances at 17 and 18 with putts that just nearly went in. Wyndham Clark is your winner. Wyndham Clark, not necessarily the most popular guy on tour by a long shot, but I really liked his post-match speech acknowledging some of his shortcomings over the last year. And it was quite the scene with his father as well. He's a good player. He's been playing very good golf this spring and into the summer. Wyndham Clark is now a 2-time U.S. Open winner. Remember, he won at LACC, Los Angeles Country Club, back in 2023. Man, Scheffler just can't make putts these days. He's right there, not even close to his A game. Not even close to his A game. He's still a top 5 finisher. And you ended up, with just 3 players under par for the weekend. That course looks brutal. It also looks beautiful, as a few of the people very close in my life can attest, because they were there over the weekend, including my youngest son, who went on Saturday and said, beautiful. Did say it was very windy, though. Very windy. All right, we got a busy show today. Evan Washburn from CBS Sports. Evan does sidelines for CBS. He's part of that Iron Eagle J.J. Watt team, the number 2 team on CBS. Evan's been on the show with us before. He's excellent. He'll join us at 11, Ben at 12, and Adam Finkelstein from CBS Sports, who covers college basketball and the NBA draft, will jump on with us at 12:35. Let me just start before I move back to the Ayuk stuff. I am going to, coming up here in the first hour of the show, I'm going to tell you who I would pick if I were the Wizards at number 1, and who I think they'll pick. And they're 2 different answers. That's coming up shortly. Now, on Brandon Ayuk and his latest video, very nice to wish everybody a happy Father's Day. It's nails on a chalkboard. I'm sorry. Most of you agree with me. Some of you don't, and you don't even understand why people like me feel this way. But it's nails on a chalkboard to hear someone say Commanders that many times in a row. If somebody were giving him really good advice and he wanted to really ingratiate himself into the fan base, he would have said, want to be a part of the Redskins or the Skins or Washington. Commanders that many times. Nails on a chalkboard, man. It is hard these days for me to listen to that. Over the weekend, Jeremy Fowler from ESPN said the following, quote, Ayuk, he's got the natural tie-in with Jaden Daniels, his teammate at Arizona State. But this one is complicated because really right now it's a standoff between the 49ers and Ayuk. He's essentially considered untradeable because of his bloated contract. That's been obvious from the get-go. And he didn't rehab with the team, and it's gotten pretty ugly. You've seen some of the Instagram videos, and so right now, if he shows up, reports to the team at any point, then maybe they can get the process started of releasing him or getting some sort of parting of ways, which is expected. Now, teams like Washington or anybody else who may look at receivers, Baltimore's been a little thin at that position. Kansas City as well. whoever gets involved, they're probably not going to trade for him. They're going to wait for him to get released, and then he's going to have the market he had a couple of years ago, but could still bring value as a former top 10 receiver. I think the part in here that we should emphasize, because we had the guy Grant Cohn, who covers the 49ers, on the show a week ago Friday. I think it was a week ago Friday, or it may have been early last week. I'm forgetting now. Max, I'm forgetting. But he kind of revealed, and this has been backed up by a few other reports, that he's going to have to apply for reinstatement. And then the 49ers have to agree that he's ready to be reinstated. It's not as easy as him just showing up. Now, with that said, it could be as easy as just showing up if he applies for reinstatement, which we don't know if he's actually done yet. He is on the reserved left squad list. He is AWOL, MIA, as far as the league's concerned and as far as the 49ers are concerned. He has to be off of that list, legitimately off of that list, which requires some sort of application for reinstatement, before the 49ers can consider releasing him. He's not releasable as of now, at least according to Grant Cohn. And again, I keep coming back to the same thing. I know that Jason La Canfora last week had a report. Others have suggested the 49ers are going to get sick of this and they're going to release him soon. I don't think, and all of you know the same thing, if we know the Shanahans like we think we know them, now we don't know the ownership as much, but I just can't imagine they're just going to go ahead and say, man, we want you to get a fresh new start. We're wishing the best for you. We're going to release you. You can go sign with Washington and your former college quarterback at Arizona State. And we want to get this done quickly so you have all summer to prepare and get indoctrinated into their culture and into their new system and their new offense so you're ready to go when the season begins. No, I don't see that at all. What I could envision is if, for whatever reason, he tried to, if he got reinstated, he showed up, and he was really going after it in a legitimate way, where the 49ers had no, choice other than to keep him or to release him. It'd be interesting if he did show up in shape, ready to roll, and just said, I'm here. I'm a 49er until otherwise, which would be the professional way to approach it. And then the 49ers started to play him like in preseason games, get him ready to play in preseason games. And then he looks great in a preseason game or two. And then all of a sudden there's a trade market for him. This story's got a lot of ways it can go from here on out. A lot of ways it can go. It's all really, though, driven by him waking up one morning and deciding, I want to focus on football more than anything else. That's going to be my communication moving forward. I want to play football again. It's 2 years. I'm hungry. I'm ready. I'm in shape. That's all I have on my mind, is playing football and getting back to what I was at the end of 2023, instead of all of the other shenanigans. The other shenanigans don't help him, in my opinion. Not with that group. There are others that might cower and say, we can't stand the dust-ups and the attention that this is getting. I don't think they care at all. We'll see. But that would be nice for him, and that'd be nice and give a comfort level to any team that ends up picking him up after he's released, if he and his communication is solely on football moving forward. We'll see what happens. Happy Father's Day to you, Brandon Ayuk. All right, you ready for this, Max?
Uh-oh.
I like Darren Peterson more than A.J. DeBonsa.
Wow.
Now,
this seems to be cropping up a lot in the DC media market over the last week or two.
Oh, really? I'm not following.
Well,
so
me and Brian have been discussing it, and it's a lot of that I've also been seeing on social media as well, is a lot of people are starting to pick up for Darren Peterson over DeBonsa. So you're not alone, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, let me just say this. I mean, I'm not the guy that wants a guy that doesn't have that killer gene. I don't want that. And I'd be very concerned that he doesn't have that. I've heard the comparisons to Kobe. That's laughable to me. Kobe Bryant, if he had played college basketball, would have never missed the amount of time for cramping. Number one Arizona coming into Fog Allen for one of the biggest games of the regular season. I mean, you got the number one team on your home floor, and you beg out 30 minutes before tip. That would never happen with Kobe Bryant, ever. I mean, literally, he'd have to be missing a limb to not play in that game. So all of that is a mystery. It's a concern. It's a red flag. And I talked about it all during the college basketball season. Like, you guys have to pay attention what's going on with this potential number one pick in the June draft, which the Wizards could ultimately end up having the number one pick. This guy is gifted, but there's something going on. I don't know what's going on. And if I had the information, I might say, nope, he's off my board completely. But just from a basketball standpoint, Darren Peterson's got the most upside in this draft. He's got more upside than A.J. Debonsa. To be honest with you, I think Caleb Wilson has more upside than A.J. Debonsa. And I like A.J. Debonsa. I think BYU's A.J. Debonsa has a chance to be a really good scoring wing in the NBA at 6'9". And I love the fact that he was out there for 40 minutes a night. That's, by the way, the max you can play in a regulation college basketball game. In like 6 of his final 15 games, he went the distance. And he can score. And in terms of his three-point shooting, which was very up and down and not great percentage-wise as a college player, he's got this stroke. Like, I'm not worried about that. Darren Peterson is one of the smoothest scorers I have ever watched at the college level. It's effortless. The space he creates without what you would call at least visible explosiveness. He is a good athlete. I'm not suggesting he isn't. He's a very good athlete. But the explosiveness is subtle, and it creates this incredible amount of space. And then he is deadly as a shooter. Deadly as a shooter. As a shooter off the dribble, from behind the arc or in the mid-range, or a catch and shoot player. He's also, I think, and I'm not sure enough people have talked about this, I think he's a good defender. I think he really has great athletic feel defensively, especially as an off-ball defender. At Kansas, you could see him seeking out steals. Off the ball, typically more than on the ball. But with his frame and his wingspan at 6'6", with a solid wingspan, I thought he moved his feet defensively very well, stayed in front of the ball very well at the college level. Look, defensively, it's always hard for 18, 19, 20-year-olds to be projected in the type of defense, unless that's their thing in college. You know, they've just not had to do it as much. But I actually think he's got a chance to become a good defender. Now, you know, part of the mystery, part of the smoke, part of the red flag, parade is, his camp. His camp says he's a point guard. He's got to go somewhere where he plays point guard. Shut up. Just stop talking. I mean, it's so ridiculous when you've got people who are in the player's camp and have the player's ear and are speaking on behalf of a player, and he's got all of this smoke around him. Now, bottom line is he's not going any worse than number 2, I don't think. I guess he could go 3rd. And he's going to have a chance, he's going to be in the NBA next year. It's not like this is the difference between him being picked in the first round or not being picked in the first round. This is the difference between him being picked first or him being picked 2nd or 3rd. He's going to get the opportunity to grow, to perhaps, push aside this, group. Who did we have on the show? Was it John Fanta? Was it Fanta who said the number one issue with Darren Peterson is the surrounding influencers, and they believe that somebody's going to have to be very direct with them and say, this is the NBA. You don't have a say anymore about when he plays and when he doesn't play and what position he plays and what position he doesn't play. One of my, just reminds me of something. I'm sure I've told this story before. One of my favorite, one of those parent-coach meetings before a season begins where, the coach, this was at the JV level in high school, I think, with my youngest son. And the coach gets the team and the parents together before the season starts. And it was one of my all-time favorite coach get-togethers in this spot. And he just said, just want to first of all tell you, I really like your boys. I'm happy they made the team. And the other thing that I wanted to mention to you is this is the last time we will have a conversation until the season's over. Everybody just stopped. And he goes, you are not to approach me about playing time or position or game strategy. If there is a legitimate, health concern or mental health concern, of course. Outside of that, there is no basketball talk between me and my assistant coaches and you. If your son has an issue, he's old enough to advocate for himself. He's old enough to work on his own behalf. It was the best. Then he said, anybody have any questions? And pretty much every arm went up. It was pretty funny. But this is what John Fanta told us, is that the people around Darren Peterson think they have a say. That's a problem, and that would concern me. I am talking just about the basketball piece. Just the basketball piece. He's got the biggest upside. I would actually say Caleb Wilson and Darius Acuff have the next two biggest upsides. And I think when you're picking number one overall, you're looking for the best opportunity to pick a player that 5, 6, 7 years down the road has a chance to contend for an MVP. Of course, you have to assume at number one overall that you feel like if you're going to pick that player rather than trade the pick, if there's a market to trade the pick, you feel like he can make some, all-star games. But at number one overall, you're sticking and picking the player that you think has the best chance to be a legitimate future superstar, MVP contender down the road. Takes a while. It's not going to happen in the first 3 or 4 years. Usually happens year 6, 7. And by the way, usually happens with another team sometimes. But I think that Darren Peterson is that guy from a basketball standpoint, more so than A.J. DeBonsa. So if I were picking, again, without having any knowledge of what the, other stuff about him is, if all the other stuff came back as, legitimately he had a creatine issue, which was creating cramping, and he had a terrible incident that scared the living crap out of him, which apparently he did, like last September before the season started, was in the emergency room, in a full body cramp, thinking that he thought that he was dying. That's a traumatic thing for anybody of any age to be in that spot. And it could have put him into a mode of being extra careful and the people around him. And I hear you on that. Like, there's a lot there that we don't know. But if it was more about not sucking it up and playing when he could play, or it was about getting bad advice about load management, or they didn't like the way he was being played because he wasn't always the guy with the ball in his hands, which apparently his crew wants him and wants everybody to know he's a point guard. He's going to thrive with the ball in his hands. By the way, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but you can't bark that out in advance. That's something you have to earn. This is not a culmination of something, this draft. It's the beginning. It's the thing that drives me crazy every single year when we watch this NBA draft in particular, but same goes for the NFL draft as well. Yes, they have arrived at a place that even with the rookie deal, it's going to mean more money and more security than many of these young people and their families have ever had. And that's a wonderful thing. But you can't treat it that way. It is the beginning. And that first contract, many times, is the only contract. And what it looks like after taxes and after everybody gets a piece of it isn't generational in a lot of cases. You want to get to the next contract and the contract after that. And so it should always be viewed as the beginning of now I've got to prove something. Now I've got to, this team that picked me has to understand that they not only they're not only getting what they thought they were getting, they're getting more. I'm going to be more for them. It's not an end. It's a beginning. I like Darren Peterson as a basketball player more at the NBA level more than any other player in this draft. And I actually think that Caleb Wilson and his talent in terms of the upside would be my number 2. I am absolutely more confident in Darius Acuff becoming a big-time scoring guard than I am anything else in this draft. Although I do think that Boozer, that he will ultimately, Cam Boozer, is going to be, an 18 and 10 guy in the NBA or a 15 and 10 guy. His floor seems to be the highest, and the character and everything else and the professionalism, the maturity, like you're going to get yourself a really good player. You're just not going to get a future MVP candidate. I could see Acuff averaging 30 a game in 3 or 4 years. He's already grown man in terms of his physical maturity. I love Darius Acuff. I don't love his resistance, his conscientious objectiveness to playing defense. I don't like that. That's going to have to change, although some of the best scoring, smaller players in the league, they get targeted a lot, including the guy that just won the MVP in the NBA Finals. I think those are my favorite players. Let me make sure. I do really like AJ DeBonsa. I like a lot about him. I don't see him as a future MVP possibility. I do see Darren Peterson as that if all of the other stuff gets cleared. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Tell me the player that you think has the best chance, and we're just talking basketball here, to be an MVP contender 5+ years down the road. For me, it's Darren Peterson. If all of the mental, if all of the personality stuff checked out, I'd pick him. And I understand that in terms of what Washington has on their roster right now, DeBonce is probably the better fit. You cannot draft that way. That's not the way I want my team to draft. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. Who in the NBA draft, it's tomorrow night, by the way, who's got the most potential basketball-wise to end up becoming down the road a legitimate MVP contender? You know, not an MVP, but somebody who's in the conversation of the best 4, 5, 6 players in the league. From a basketball standpoint, I think it's Darren Peterson. And if everything else cleared, all of the intangible stuff, all of the due diligence on his missing in action last year at Kansas, on the crew that he has around him, who apparently, you know, pretty influential right now with a big voice. If all of it turns out to be manageable, reasons given, I don't care that he, you know, might be a true guy that has to have the ball in his hands and we have Trae Young. I'm taking the player. Trae Young's not a top 5 player. He's not an MVP contender. Okay, I'm taking the player that gives me the best chance to end up with an MVP contender down the road. I do like AJ DeBonsa, and I'm not going to be, as a Wizards fan, I'm not going to be upset if they take DeBonsa. I think DeBonsa has a chance to have a really good NBA career. I don't see him in the same way I see Darren Peterson in terms of his true upside. I actually see Caleb Wilson from North Carolina more in that Darren Peterson, and even Darius Acuff, although he's a smaller player, as a point guard. But I think out of everything in the draft, there are 2 things that I'd be most surprised at. If Cam Boozer wasn't, you know, a legitimate, solid 15 and 10 guy in the NBA, even if it's coming off the bench, you know, a 12 and 8 guy, because I think he's going to be in the league for a long, long time. And I think he has a chance to be a really good player too. And if Darius Acuff doesn't become a big-time scorer at the point guard position, and I'm talking about, you know, 25 plus a night, not as a rookie, not as a second-year, third-year player, but once he gets into that 3rd, 4th, 5th year, he's going to be special as a scorer. And really, in terms of his physical prowess right now and maturity, he's a grown man already. When you watch him, he is really physically mature. Maybe there's more to come. I like Acuff a lot. I like Mikel Brown. I like Kingston Flemings. There are other players down the road, and I've read all about the Wizards' apparent interest. Kevin O'Connor reported their apparent interest in getting back into the first round later to add another kind of first-round talent. But Darren Peterson, for me, is the player basketball-wise that has the best chance down the road of becoming an MVP candidate. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Phone lines are open. Give me the player that you think has the biggest basketball upside. Of course, there are concerns about Darren Peterson. I mean, this is a dude that literally decided in the biggest game of the year, 30 minutes before tip, I can't do it. There could be legitimate explanations, but we do know his coach, Bill Self, got to the point where he was frustrated. The staff was frustrated in Lawrence at Kansas. Some of that may be they don't blame him. They blame the people that were in his ear and were his biggest advisors. And you got to make sure, as John Fanta told us a few weeks ago, that they're very clear. Once you enter the NBA, it's big boy time. It's grown-up basketball. You know, parents and surrounding, advisors, they don't have a say. And if there's concern that they're going to have a say that the young man's going to listen to, you can't take them. If there's going to be a headache and there's going to be a lot of other stuff. But in terms of the basketball, give me Darren Peterson. What do you think, Max, before we get to calls?
Man, at this point, I don't have many thoughts other than just please pick the right guy. I just haven't been paying attention to who or what separates I know Peterson's such a great scorer, and I know AJ is pretty much the full package, but I'm leaning AJ right now just because he came on really strong last year at BYU. So I'm probably going AJ.
There are a couple of games, and I've gone back and watched a bunch of Darren Peterson and AJ DeBonsa and a couple of others just in preparation for this week. There are just a couple of games that are just like, wow, I don't know how he just got 27 against Kansas State in 29 minutes. I don't know how that happened because it didn't even look like he was trying. Seriously, he is so smooth. He gets separation so easily. And there is quickness and there is some explosiveness there, but it doesn't look that way. It looks like he's not trying. In his lone matchup against BYU all the way back at the end of January, this was one of those head-scratching games because he had 18 in the first half, and then early in the second half asked to come out and didn't go back into a game in which BYU was making a big comeback in and had a chance to potentially have they were down 18-20 at halftime because of what Darren Peterson did in the first half of that game. And then he begged out. DeBonsa, he was the best player in the game. It wasn't even close, Peterson. He was 6 of 8 from the floor, 3 for 5 from behind the arc. He had in 18 minutes, in 20 minutes of play, he had 18 points, 3 steals. And then he's on the sideline as BYU's making a big comeback. And the announcers are wondering, is Peterson going to come back into the game? And, you know, what was interesting about that is nobody's even looking down the bench. They knew he wasn't coming back into the game. He had done his part, I guess, at that point. Kansas did win that basketball game. He was big and clutch in the game they lost in the tournament to St. John's in the second round. He had an unbelievable game against Arizona in the rematch. He missed the first game. Now, Arizona won that game comfortably, but you saw some of the one-on-one opportunities, some of the offensive opportunities, and he went after it in that game in terms of shot volume and trying to carry them. They got beat. Arizona was a better team. Kansas was just a bit disjointed this year overall. He had a game in early January against TCU. It was one of the better games in the Big 12 season. They won that game in overtime, 104-100 in that game. And he had 32 in that game on 8 of 18, 3 of 8 from behind the arc, but just kept getting to the free throw line in clutch situations over and over again. There is a methodical way in which he goes about. I think it's really attractive to watch him play basketball. Of course, I'm a massive Kawhi Leonard fan from a basketball player standpoint. There's a methodical way in which he gets to his spots, in which he creates space. Now, Kawhi's a different player. He's got the super long arms. He is flat out, I think, the best two-way player of his generation. I think Peterson's going to be pretty good as a defender. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. There's a big breaking basketball story, too. Let me just mention it real quick. The head coach of the national champion Michigan Wolverines, Dusty May, is leaving Michigan for the Dallas Mavericks job. So Dusty May, 2 years in Ann Arbor, wins a national championship in the second year. He's off to the NBA. I'm telling you, college coaches, when they get these opportunities in the NBA, they're going to take them more and more because it's just easier. You don't have to deal with the changing landscape, the incredible dynamic part of the sport. It's ever changing, and you don't know which direction it's going in, and NIL and salary cap and, all of that. I mean, we've seen coaches essentially retire rather than face what's been going on. Dusty May, took Florida Atlantic, remember, to a Final Four, took Michigan to the national title, and he's now the head coach in Dallas. All right, 301-230-0980. The draft is tomorrow night. The Wizards have the number 1 pick. Who's the player, basketball-wise only, we're not talking about the other stuff, that you think has the highest ceiling, the biggest NBA star possibility and potential? Let's start with our guy, JYD. JYD, go ahead.
The guy, how you doing, Kevin? First
Hey,
of all,
Joey,
much peace and love to you.
You
Basically, I would say that Caleb Wilson has the highest upside and possibly to be a MVP candidate in the next 4 or 5 years. And
I think he's the best. I think he's the best all-around athlete. If I didn't say this already, he's a ridiculous athlete. He's got, a 7'2" wingspan. He's got a 40-inch vertical. And by the way, he's got some killer in him too when you watch him. As a rebounder, as a defender, I like Caleb Wilson a lot. I'm with you. I think those are the two that I would put at the top of my list of the biggest, potential star ceilings. I would put Peterson 1, Wilson 2.
If you just look at Wilson's tape, for a guy his size, he can put the ball on the floor.
Yep.
He can get to where he wants to go. He can rebound.
Oh yeah.
He can play defense.
Mm-hmm.
He can handle the ball. He can guard. He can guard just about anybody on the floor.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And he's a relentless rebounder. He's a relentless rebounder.
Yeah.
I like him too a lot. He's a shot blocker too. I mean, with that length and that size at 6'9", 6'10", I mean, he's got a chance to be a major force. For those that don't know, North Carolina, Caleb Wilson broke his hand late in the season, so he missed some of their biggest games at the end of the year and missed the tournament as well. But he had some games where he was just absolutely relentless, at the rim offensively, at the rim defensively. The tape, I watched a couple of highlights of Wilson. I watched him during the season too. There's a game against Florida State. It was early in the conference schedule. I think it was 24-16. He had just an absolute relentless rebounder against a team with size. It was impressive, really impressive.
And I'd tell you another guy too. You better look out for, like you mentioned him. Akoff has a chance to be the next Brunson in this league.
Akoff is a player that I'm going to follow him super closely because the moment I saw him in that, that double overtime, triple overtime loss or whatever it was against in that game against Alabama, I'm like, this dude, I mean, he had in the season, I think he had 7 games of 30 or more. And in that game, in the double overtime loss at Alabama, he had 49 in a college game. He is going to be a big-time scorer. Thanks, JYD. Let's go to Aveen. Aveen, who do you see in this draft as having the biggest ceiling, the biggest upside basketball-wise?
Hey, Kevin. So just in terms of upside, even just in terms of upside, I've been going back and forth between DeBonsa and Peterson. And, with DeBonsa, I see somebody who's with that height, 6'9", and that wingspan, crazy wingspan. There's not many people who can dribble the ball like that, being that tall with that wingspan. There's not many people who can just move the way he does with that height or have that explosiveness. So to me, his upside projects as somebody who is pretty much unstoppable going to the rim whenever he gets the ball and going downhill. He's going to draw a lot of fouls. He's going to finish at the rim a lot. And that's like a huge, unique kind of skill set to have. That's like a LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo kind of skill set where it just feels like you're unstoppable going to the rim. But then when I see Peterson, it's the shot making. Like, you can't teach the shooting and you can't teach the shot making. And that's probably why I'd still go with Peterson in terms of upside, just because, I think I see some of that shot making where it's like he's putting up shots over 2 guys or a defender draped over him. He's taking long threes and you're like, how did he make that shot? How did he get that shot off? It's kind of like Steph Curry or Luka Doncic. Like, you can't teach that when you shoot it. So I'm going with Peterson just because the shot making, it's like something you can't teach.
I'll say it again. I don't even think it. If Darren Peterson had played a normal college basketball season, there would be no debate right now. There'd be no debate right now. He'd be the number one pick over DeBonsa. If he didn't have all of this stuff swirling around him, if he had played a normal college basketball season, hadn't missed all the games he missed, hadn't, come out of all the games that he came out of, if he had the resume in terms of minutes played, games played, et cetera, that DeBonsa has, I personally don't even think we'd be having this discussion. And the Wizards would be in a draft with the number one pick with an absolute obvious default number one in Darren Peterson. I really believe that. That's how much I think he is got something that, you don't always see. Every few drafts you see it. I'm not, by the way, let me be clear. Wouldn't be Wemby, wouldn't even be Zion, in terms of what people thought he was going to be coming out. Wouldn't necessarily be Cooper Flagg, but he'd be the definite number one in this pick, in this draft, had he had a normal, without controversy, 1 year at Kansas. Thank you, Aveen. Let's go to our guy, Bones. Bones, who's got the biggest NBA star potential, biggest upside? Who do you have?
Hey, Kevin, man, thanks for taking my call. Shout out
Bones.
to my main man, Mac, man. Hey, I can't believe that you went there with Darren Peterson, man. After all that luggage, man, and stuff that boy did in the college, man, and you went there. But I understand his ball skills.
I did go there,
He
and
got
I'm not ignoring that. I want to be clear. If I had all the information and the information said you're getting a major pain in the ass and this guy doesn't love basketball, all of that, I would obviously avoid him like the plague. We're just talking about pure basketball ability and talent.
Okay, well, pure basketball and talent. He got A1 ball skills, right? But I like that energy that AJ DeBonsa brings,
Me too.
man.
Me too.
We haven't had a player with that type of energy, man, since John Wall, man. John Wall was the last player that had that type of energy, man, on the Wizards, man. So it's just the energy. I need that energy, man. I need somebody on that side, on that bench, to hype up everybody else. Simple as that. So I'm gonna go with AJ DeBonsa.
Thank you, Bones. Yeah, I mean, I get the energy. There's a lot about DeBonsa that I like. If Darren Peterson had played in every college game and hadn't had the issues that he had, I'm going to tell you right now, seriously, I don't think there'd be a debate right now. I don't think there would be a debate. And in terms of intensity and energy and all of that, it's different with it's different with Peterson. Peterson is DeMar DeRozan. He's Kawhi Leonard. In terms of the style, there is a very methodical, effortless way in which he plays. Even defensively, you can see it. Now, he's got a big-time wingspan for a kid 6'6". He's got great basketball feel and anticipation. But you watch him offensively, even at the college level, sure, he can play off the ball, catch, shoot, drive, create, and he's a good passer too. But he works his way to his spots. He gets the space he needs, and he can just flat out go get buckets. And it's like, really? He's going to be one of those dudes. If he turns out to be what his basketball talent says he can be, it's going to be one of those guys where it's like, he had 38? Really? Didn't seem like it. It's that kind of player. It's not going to be allowed 30, 35. But he's going to go get his. Love the style in which he plays. And he is exceptional as an offensive scorer. And again, I think as an off-ball defender, he's pretty good. By the way, I haven't said this, and I will when we come back, but I'll tell you who I think the Wizards will select, and I think most of you probably see this, even though there is, and Max mentioned this. I actually checked just sort of the national feel during the last break or 2 breaks ago, and it does seem like more and more people are thinking that the Wizards might take Peterson. But I'll give you who I think they're going to take when we come back. From my guy T writes, is he Gervin smooth? No one was Gervin smooth. No one was the Iceman. And by the way, Gervin was never, a point guard, never the guy that initiated it. It was a different game, obviously. But he was a great example of, you'd look up at the end of the game and it's like, he just got 48. How did that happen? And it was effortless and it was super smooth. John Rothstein from CBS Sports at one point tweeted out in early February, I've been doing this for 20 years. Darren Peterson is as smooth and effortless of an offensive talent as I've ever seen. There is definitely that vibe in watching Darren Peterson. It's like, wow, can he score? And wow, it doesn't even look like he's sweating. All of the other stuff, though, comes into play. We don't have the information on all the other stuff. Got to count on the team to get that right. I think the Wizards are going to take A.J. DeBonsa, and I do see more and more mocks coming in with Peterson. I think it's going to be DeBonsa. I think they're going to go for positional, the best positional value for them. I hate that because I'd be trying to pick a future MVP. That's what I'd be trying to do. And maybe they think DeBonsa is that. I don't. I think Caleb Wilson and Darren Peterson are the two players at the top of this draft anyway that have a chance to be future MVP contenders. And I love Acuff Jr. I think he's just going to be a big-time scorer. Football conversation next with CBS Sports' Evan Washburn. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. Joining me right now is Evan Washburn from CBS Sports. You know Evan from his sideline work on NFL games and also college basketball, NCAA tournament games. He does a great job. I think, by the way, last year you were with Iron Eagle, right? And maybe even J.J. Watt, wasn't he part of Iron Eagle's pairing?
That's correct. Yeah, Ian and I have been together for, this might be our 11th season, and JJ joined us last year, and it was great to have him. He did an unbelievable job.
Yeah, I thought he was really good too. And Iron Eagle is certainly one of the best. And it's a great, group for CBS, the number 2 group, with you a big part of it as well. By the way, you can follow Evan on X at Evan Washburn. Evan's actually a local for the most part. Grew up in Annapolis, I believe, and still live in the area, right?
Correct. Yeah, grew up in Annapolis, went to Severn School, and then been in Baltimore now for, I think it's a little over 15 years. So been in and around the DMV my entire life.
Are you a fan of any teams?
Well, it's interesting when I'm 41 and people often ask, you're a Ravens fan, because if you're Annapolis, you're kind of split in between DC and Baltimore. And I remember growing up, and the Redskins, because the Colts had left and my dad was a Colts fan. So he just kind of moved over to the Skins. And then when the Ravens showed up when we were in, I guess, middle school, friends had tickets, so would go to games. But I wouldn't say that I was living and dying by every game or down. And then, as you know, once you get into the business, you kind of get behind the curtain a little bit. It does take the fandom out, but you root for people. So there's plenty of people in these buildings, whether it be DC, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, that I root for, because I know that when those teams do well, life's a lot better for them.
Yeah. Evan, by the way, went to the University of Delaware, played lacrosse there for all 4 years. All right. Have you looked at, by the way, week 1? Because I think I've picked out where you're going to be. I'm assuming you don't know
good.
yet.
I like this.
You don't know yet,
I do
right?
not. No, we won't know until probably the 3rd week of August.
All right. So I'm assuming, Nance and Romo will have Packers Vikings at 4:25, because that's the big CBS 4:25 game. And so I've got you with Ian and JJ Watt in Houston for Bills Texans.
You've done this before. I would agree. I think that that's a good bet. It's a fun game. Our entire crew plays. So announcers and producer, director, all the behind-the-scenes folks. We look at the schedule when it gets released, and we all put together our 1 through 18, weeks 1 through 18, our prediction for where our crew's going. And it's kind of a fun, everybody puts something in a pot, and then the winner at the end of the year, whoever had the best percentage, if you will, of those predictions. And it's gotten a lot harder with this fractured schedule and random Christmas and Black Friday games.
Right.
But I think the consensus of the group was, yes, Texans Bills, which we've ended up doing the last few years. So it'll be fun to do another chapter in it.
Now, I'm looking at Washington's schedule. They've got 2 CBS games currently on the schedule. The last 3 games of the year are flex games, TBD games. There's some Saturday, Sunday possible choices there. But the 2 games right now earmarked for CBS, Sunday, December 6th at Tennessee. I bet you're not there. But maybe Sunday, December 13th, Houston in Landover. That's a possibility.
I like it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think both DC and I would put Houston in this category. They fall in it could go one of 2 ways this year. And they could be a team that finds itself in December as the prime 1 o'clock window game, or one of the, as we know, it's kind of the map, if you will, the coverage map.
Yeah.
And depending on the quality of the team and the matchup, they dictates more of that coverage map. So DC and Houston could be one of those that's definitely taken a majority of the country at 1 p.m. Late in the season.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of. I love playing these schedule games too. Just and I've been doing this for years on my show. I actually, it's become super popular. I'm actually thinking about hanging it up now that everybody's doing it. But for 20 years, I've been doing like a mock schedule before the schedule comes out.
I love it.
Yeah, and so I love these games, and then I love figuring out which networks and which network teams we're going to have. But I'm trying to think of the playoff games that you had, because obviously Iron's the number 2 team. Did you have Buffalo, Denver? Did you have that overtime game? Were you there?
So I was. So the way it works for me, our crew I think it's every other year. Again, it's all changing now with more people involved, whether it be the streamers and Amazon, ESPN's larger role in terms of playoff coverage, and now having a Super Bowl every other year, let's call it, our crew, so Ian, JJ now, and myself would have a wild card game and then sometimes a divisional game as well. And then whenever our crew's not doing playoffs, I will join the A crew. So I had Buffalo. So I was in Denver for the Patriots Broncos AFC Championship game. I was not there for Buffalo Denver, which would have been the divisional.
So were you in Foxborough for the divisional round?
I think I was actually I think our crew didn't have a game, but they instead of adding me as a second sideline, I was doing coverage from an NFC site for our pregame show. So whenever we have AFC, we always have AFC champ. So AFC champ, and whenever we have Super Bowl, it's a guaranteed 2 sideline situations.
Right.
Tracy Wilson and myself. And then other playoff games is kind of TBD. Sometimes we have the game, so we'll just do it as a normal crew, or they'll add a second, or you're doing NFC coverage.
How about that conference championship game in Denver? Like, I keep thinking about last year, just in that the Seattle-New England matchup, even when we got to the postseason, was very improbable from my standpoint. I actually thought the Rams were the best team in the league, and their special teams hurt them twice against Seattle, including in the NFC title game. And I really thought Houston was one of the best defensive teams I've watched in recent years, and I thought they might end up making a deep run. But when we got to that AFC Championship game and Jarrett Stidham is starting for Bo Nix and the snow comes in the second half, that was a wild game. In part, right, Evan, because the snow really wasn't predicted to come in that soon or that strongly.
100%. It was unlike anything. So that was year 12 of doing sidelines, I guess 14 if you factor some college football. So just kind of being in the elements. And we've had some crazy cold games, some crazy wet games. But you're right. I think for both teams, it was the fact that it was not predicted to be that impactful to the play. But anyone who's spent time in Denver knows that things can change dramatically quick. So I don't think, and I don't think either team necessarily used it as an excuse for the outcome, but it definitely impacted what you could do schematically. So, and it gave, I think, New England an edge because they seemed to figure out quicker what they could and couldn't do. And Denver, on top of figuring out, hey, what is Stidham capable of? Now we got to factor in, all right, what is Stidham capable of doing in the Bo Nix plan, but now with an incredible snow globe situation where it was that situation too, and it was cool to be a part of trying to help the viewer understand it. You, depending on what direction you were going, was wildly different in terms of the impact it was going to have on the ability to throw the ball and really do anything, because it was directly in your face going one way, and it was directly behind you, so it wasn't as impactful going the other. So it was cool. It was wild. And I definitely think it gave New England an even better opportunity to win.
Yeah, it was certainly a memorable title game because of the changing elements. All right. So one of the reasons I reached out to you, actually the primary reason, is you got together with Dan Quinn the other day for about 20 minutes or so. And I was curious as to what you kind of thought were the big takeaways. You know, when you sit down with coaches, and you do it all the time, and you're part of the crew, I'm sure, that goes in, you know, a day early and gets to talk to quarterbacks and coaches as part of the broadcast team. But what did you think was interesting about what Quinn told you the other day?
So just a little context. It was part of an overall series that I've wanted to do for a number of years, and finally was able to get greenlit through our commitment to the YouTube platform about process. And I've heard the term process, as you have, all these years talking to athletes and coaches. And I would say for the most part, it's always fallen in the category of a cliche, but I felt like there was an opportunity to maybe get a little deeper into what that actually looks like. And so I used process as a broad theme for a series, but separated into 3 categories for 3 episodes. So I looked at it, the physical process, the mental process, and the emotional process of an off season for an NFL coach and or player. And for the physical, kind of obvious. What do you do physically to prime your body for the season? I wanted a quarterback. We did it with Sam Darnold. He took us through a throwing session in the offseason. It was really a how-to of throw the football. It was really interesting and enjoyed it. The mental, I wanted to do an NFL head coach in their process of how do they review a season and going into that self-scouting process and how it impacts the approach going ahead the following year, whether things ended poorly or positively. And then lastly, it's the emotional. That one will release next week. That's how does a player refill the emotional tank after a long season? Basically, what's their joy off the field? We played golf with Kyle Hamilton, and it was a great time. So back to DQ. So he was who I wanted to have
for process.
The mental.
Yeah,
and largely because every time I have spent time with him, as you mentioned in those production meetings, he inevitably is so open and not about like, hey, we're going to run this play on third down or we're going to run this defense against what they do. Just more about how they build out their culture and the foundation and, to use his term, the standards and those things. So I thought, well, if I can get an hour, which is what we got, and a little over an hour with him, I think he'd be great for this. And he was. And to answer your specific question, the biggest takeaway was how much 2025 definitely impacted him, as you imagine it would, the disappointment of it, in the decision-making that he's brought to 2026 when it comes to everything this coaching staff is going to do to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And that sounds obvious on the surface, but the level of detail that this guy brings to who's obviously on the staff, but how the staff's interacting, how they're meeting, how they're reviewing film, what the film's supposed to look like, all those things. That was, I think, something that consistently came up no matter what I asked him.
Yeah, I played a portion of it on my show yesterday, and it was the part in which you kind of asked him to, evaluate 2025 and, what you're doing to, kind of correct it. And he said, and you set it up with, this was the most injured team in the league in terms of week one starters. And look, they didn't have their quarterback for essentially, he played 4 games start to finish. When you lose your best player and he's a quarterback for 13 of the 17 games in terms of playing start to finish, you're pretty much doomed in the NFL. And they were certainly doomed. But I thought his answer was an interesting one in that when he was on with me 2 months ago, I asked him a similar question and he said, look, you kind of clean the slate because that, there wasn't a whole hell of a lot you could do, but you have to go back and find out why your team ended up being so injured. Was it our process? Was it our training? Was it our the way we handled the injuries? Was it our practice schedule? And he didn't tell me what he told you, which I thought was very interesting. And that is he felt right from the jump that they weren't as sharp, they weren't as urgent, they weren't as competitive, they weren't as connected, was a word that he used with you.
Desperate was also the word.
And wasn't as desperate, exactly. I thought that was interesting. And, give me what you kind of took away from that, because they were doomed once Jaden was done for 13 games. They were never going to win more games than they lost without their best player on the field. Not to mention all of their other best players who were out for significant portions of the season. And yet, maybe the season was in trouble even before the injuries.
I think what I took from it was just, and it's something we all know because we say it, but it was a healthy reminder. The margin for error in this league is so slim. Right. And we talk about each game coming down to often a score, but the fact, and I don't think he was selling me a bill of goods, that he really feels like it now with, again, context, the ability to review, he could see in an OTA film practice, a film of an OTA practice and whatever that is, call it April or May. He put it right next to an OTA April-May practice from the 2024 season, ahead of the 2024 season. and they could see as a staff the stark difference in the desperation, in the execution, in the intensity, all those things. That's a reminder of the things that are happening in that building right now will dictate whether or not that team wins or loses more in 2026. Yes, he's not going to make the point, even though I do think coaches and players mistake. There's explanations for the things and there's excuses. It's all right to give an explanation that our best players were injured and we were without them. That's an explanation as to the why. But what I appreciate about Dan is he feels like it's deeper than that. And that's taking real accountability, because it's real easy to talk about the injuries because I think it's a real reason why they struggled. But he's looking at it like, even if we're healthy, there were things that I didn't like about our process and what we did as a staff last year. That's why we looked at that tape and why they burned and went through that exercise of burning aspects of their process and the things they did as a staff as sort of a cathartic experience getting ready for 2026.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the fine line between winning and losing in the NFL is finer than in any other professional sports league. And, we as, commentators and as fans, we understand watching this league that injuries are a legitimate reason for why a season went the way it went. But you don't want your coaches using it as excuses. And Quinn didn't. Even when I asked him, he said, well, it's not about that. It's about finding out why it happened and going back and learning. And I think the big takeaway from that part of the conversation is what you just said, is that it was for him, even without the injuries, there was something that was off. So with that said, they got a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. Do you think he senses that that's not going to happen again, that things are connected, things are urgent, things are desperate like they were in 2024, as much as they can be in April, May, and June?
I think that he's been around it long enough, as we have and you have, to know that you don't know right now. You can't say with 100% conviction that this will be different. But what I took away from it, and I witnessed it in the approach of that day, because we were in the building for a few hours prior to talking to folks, getting ready for Dan to be available to sit with us. And it's clear that their level of intensity in what was the first week of June, and has been the case up until that point, and I imagine will be up until they break before training camp and then throughout training camp, they're going to be able to walk away. And he made that point too in the interview. They will have exhausted every aspect of the process and so that the results will be what they will be, and they will not feel good about it if it's not good, but they will at least be able to sleep at night knowing, hey, we did everything we said we were going to do. We did it with intention. There was no ambiguity. As he puts it, you're going to know how we get down the second you walk into this building, the second you watch us practice, the second you watch us play. And it feels like they kind of lost that a little bit last year, and they're going to do everything that they're physically and mentally and emotionally capable of to at least make sure that doesn't happen. Whether that means they go, back to an NFC title game, or they're winning the division, again, that's what makes this league so entertaining. We have no idea.
We continue with Evan Washburn from CBS Sports. Do you think that there's any less confidence in Jaden Daniels than there was at the end of 2024 in that building?
I'd be guessing if I would be complete, because that really wasn't a big topic. It's funny, I didn't ask one. I mean, you saw we trimmed what was probably a 45-minute interview down to whatever you saw about their 20. So I didn't ask one Jaden Daniels question, because it was really pitched to Dan, and it's what I wanted to do. Is it was more of a view into,
got it, again,
the idea of process. But again, it would be speculative, but having kind of done this as long as we have, I don't think anything that came out of last year would give me pause about what Jaden means to and can continue to be for that team. Health is a real thing, and I think we'll know pretty quickly if those unfortunate aspects from a health perspective are behind him. It doesn't mean he's going to be clean the rest of the way, whether it's this year or moving forward. But I think there's still just an absolute rock solid comfort, if you will, that they know they have a guy, which is what every team in the league is chasing from a quarterback position.
Out of the 23, 24 minutes that got cut, what did we miss that would have been really good that you wanted to be in there?
Well, some of the stuff we popped up on social, we did a little bit more retrospective, like just having him tell fun stories about Cam Chancellor. We got into things like the Marcus Mariota play where he gets decked on the sideline, and I was kind of joking with him about, I kind of wish I was working that game as a sideline reporter because I would have loved to have tried to get something out of him going into half because I'm not sure he remembers going into half.
Right.
Stuff like that, and just kind of getting into his journey as a defensive lineman from Salisbury. It's funny thinking about where I grew up and living in this area. I think people forget he spent a pretty pivotal portion of his life not far from where I am right now in Ocean City.
I think he spent some time. I think he spent some time at Secrets, Hon. I'm pretty sure he did. Yeah, he's talked about it.
Oh, good. Yeah, I should have gotten into that. Had I known, we had done this interview prior, I would have come with Fager's questions. But no, it was just some of that stuff, which again will hopefully be repurposed in other ways. And we did like a tour of the office. Some of that pops up on the front end of the piece where he's got that cool painting that his wife gave him of Abraham Lincoln decked out in all this like blinged out commander's gear, and stuff like that. Like the other part of it, Kevin, which I know you do in your side of things, and what I hope we can do for fans is the personalities of both players and coaches. It is something I'm always fascinated with because as special as they are in their craft, they're just human beings. They're just like us. They do a lot of the same stuff. They have a lot of the same insecurities, vulnerabilities, passions, whatever it might be. And walking around his office and having him show me like the Hawaii stuff, which I know didn't make the piece, and we were trying to find a way to get it in there. It just didn't really fit with the flow. But like how important going to Hawaii for him in the offseason.
Right.
The way he put it is like, I'm in the red when I go there. And then when I come back, which is right before training camp, like he's in the green, he's primed and he's ready. And like, it's spiritual, it's physical, it's all the things, that we were talking about with process. And so that was probably another big ticket item that we didn't get in there that I thought was really cool. Like he's in a rowing club in the morning with, I'm going to mispronounce the boats that they row in Hawaii or wherever his place is. But he was talking about how cool that is for him to be a part of that community in the mornings and stuff.
Do you think he's feeling pressure heading into this season?
Oh yeah, for sure. And not in like terms like a hot seat type pressure. I think, look, Dan, this is his life. He's all ball all the time. I think all coaches to some degree are, but I would say there's a spectrum there. Sometimes it's dictated by, is he a young coach that's got young kids and he's got some other things he's got to manage? Like Dan Quinn is like, this is, he was talking about his schedule and he's not, I don't mean it in like an unhealthy way, but like this is what he's 100% in. Whenever we were talking first week of June, it felt like at times I was like, is this too intense? Because I did want these to feel a little light, these pieces, like definitely with Sam and with Kyle, it's got a lighter tone. Like Dan's, as you watch the interview, like it was, I took it away from it. Like this is a guy who's feeling it. Like he's ready to go with 26 because not does he just want to put 2020 behind him. He wants to put into practice all of the things that he's done the day that season ended to now, and then obviously into week one. So I do feel like there's a pressure. He feels the pressure. Any of the guys in that position do. But I do also think that's kind of what he's attracted to. This is what he wants to do more than anything, it would appear. And that's important if you're in that role.
What do you think about Washington in 2026?
I touched on it when we were going through some of the matchups. I really do feel like they're a team that there's always, and it's the beauty of the league. I do say each year I'm involved in it, I feel like the less I know when it comes to who's going to be good and who's not. But you do, when I'm setting up my training camp tour, I kind of look at the league and go, all right, who do I think I'm going to have to see a lot of? And that means they're going to be on the better end or higher end of wins and losses. And I would say Washington definitely is not a team that I would cross off a training camp tour list where I'm just like, I'm just not going to see them. So it might be a waste of a trip, just when you have limited time. Washington to me is like, I could go there, I can invest time, like they're going to be in the mix, and I would feel confident in doing that, but I wouldn't be shocked if it still was a grind. I think they're going to be much improved from last year, but that's I don't think good enough for that fan base and even for that building. So they're a question mark team for me, as much as anybody is, or I should say everybody is, but they're one where I wouldn't like put the house on, like they're back in the mix, winning that division. But if you told me they were, I would totally understand why, because I just kind of lived it, at least for a day.
I mean, they were horrible defensively last year, even before the injuries.
Yeah, the coordinator thing is going to be,
Yeah.
and that was in the piece too, and I appreciated it. He was like, look, I'm bold. Like, this is what I want.
Yes.
That is
that was
massive, but maybe that's why I'm so waffling here. I just don't know what David Blau is going to be like as a play caller. Durante stepping in at the defensive side, he's been in and around great defenses. He hasn't called one. Dan's going to obviously have his impact there, as he always does. So it's just those two positions are important, and we don't really know anything right now.
You said something just a moment ago, and I just jotted it down. You said, they're going to be better next year, but being better isn't good enough for the fans, and it's not even good enough for the building. What did you mean by the building? Do you mean ownership? Do you mean general manager, or do you just mean the entire building? Because when I asked you the question about pressure, there are a lot of our fans, and our fan base, that think that Dan's entering this season on a very hot seat.
Yeah, look, I get that. That comes with the market and the way things go, really just in the league in general these days. No, I meant the pressure because I think that the internal standard for what Dan wants and what Adam Peters wants and what everybody wants is to be better and to be relevant and to not have to deal with what they dealt with last year. So, speaking to the organizational pressure or management or ownership, I would have no idea. But that's just the life in the league, man. It is. People quickly forget what you did a year ago or 2 years ago.
Thank you for doing this. I know you got to run. I always enjoy having you on.
Yeah,
you do such a great job, and we'll do it again hopefully before the season begins. Good job on that thing. It's called The Process. You guys can get access to it through either Evan's X account, which is at Evan Washburn, but just search for it on NFL on CBS on YouTube. And 2 of the episodes are up, and they look really good. And the one with Dan was excellent. Thanks, Evan.
Thanks, Kevin. Talk to you down the road.
Evan Washburn, everybody's CBS Sports. When we come back, how hot is Dan Quinn's seat really? Somebody believes very hot, and they've already picked out his successor. That's next. Max and I during the break were trying to find the odds on first coach to be fired in 2026. I know that I've seen them, but we can't find them anywhere. I guess a lot of sites have pulled those odds for some reason. Last week, or over the weekend, excuse me, Jason La Canfora, who covered the team for the Post for many years, has been up in Baltimore, CBS, lots of different, NFL outlets over the years. He had something on Washington last week, and I'm forgetting what it is now. What did he have that we referenced?
Was it Ayuk related?
It probably was Ayuk related. Oh, yes. He reported that the 49ers were planning on releasing Ayuk prior to training camp. So over the weekend, he wrote about Dan Quinn being on the hot seat heading into 2026. Look, I think a lot of you probably agree with that. I would not, me personally, I wouldn't say the seat is hot, but I would say it's warm. Again, I can't imagine anybody reasonable, new ownership, Josh Harrison Company, Mitch Rales, etc., Adam Peters, front office, could hang 2026 on Dan Quinn. I'm sorry, but I just would never be able to do that if I own the team. I understand the reality of the NFL. The reality is when your best players, especially when your best player is your quarterback and he doesn't play, your season is doomed no matter what you try to do. Of course, there were moments like the Minnesota game where the injuries didn't explain everything. We've talked about that. La Canfora wrote over the weekend that Dan Quinn, while not mentioned as often as others who are coaching for their jobs in the upcoming season, that several executives from rival clubs believe he is in a make or break season. This from La Canfora. Washington's ownership group wants to project cohesion after years of tumultuous ownership with Daniel Snyder as the controlling party, but their actions this offseason spoke loudly to others around the league. GM Adam Peters wields considerable power with ownership, and Quinn's staff was largely gutted this offseason, including both of his coordinators. Quinn was hired largely for his success as a defensive coordinator, but that unit suffered in both years, and he is no longer installing his own defense and overseeing that unit. Once Daniels begins to make massive quarterback money, anything close to his rookie season would ensure that the ability to construct a roster becomes much more difficult. When a team makes as sweeping staff changes as Washington did, the industry views that as putting the head coach on notice. And then he's got this quote from a longtime NFL personnel executive who said, quote, "Keep an eye on former Bills head coach Sean McDermott there as in Washington next year. Just remember who told you first," closed quote. Well, all we have here is one longtime NFL personnel executive, so we're not going to remember who that was because it's anonymous. But that longtime NFL personnel executive told La Canfora, Sean McDermott. Can you imagine if they replaced Dan Quinn with another defensive head coach? That would be interesting. Let me just tell you, like, if you go through the league's head coaches, Quinn is not at the top of the list odds-wise, I'm going to guess. We don't have the odds in front of us. Here's who I would say is on a warmer seat than Quinn. Are you ready for my list? My list would include Nick Sirianni, for sure, is on a hotter seat in Philadelphia. You agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Aaron Glenn is on a hotter seat in New York. I don't think Mike Vrabel, even because of the Diana situation, is on any sort of warm seat. Hold on. I'm going through the list of coaches.
Zach Taylor.
Zach Taylor is on a hotter seat than Dan Quinn. No doubt about it. Hold on. Going through the list of coaches. Shane Steichen, no. DeMeco Ryans, no. You know who's going to be surprisingly on a list if Detroit doesn't play well?
Ooh.
Dan Campbell. But he's not on he's not on that seat right now. Okay, I'm not saying that. But imagine they go 2 straight years of not getting it done. I would think that his shtick could grow old pretty quickly. Is Brian Schottenheimer, does he have to get the Cowboys to the postseason this year?
I don't think
Jerry's
this
actually
year, but
always been surprisingly patient.
is LaFleur on a hot seat of some kind if the Packers have
Didn't
a
they
disappointing
just give
year?
him an extension?
Did they?
I thought they ended up giving him an extension.
It might have.
I mean, I would say Zach Taylor, Nick Sirianni, who was the third? Aaron Glenn are all on hotter seats than Quinn. By the way, if for whatever reason the Chargers don't go to the playoffs and win a game or two, could Jim Harbaugh be on a warm seat?
You know, it's funny. I just scrolled past that name and started thinking that exact same thing.
Could Kevin O'Connell be in the same if Minnesota fails miserably?
Now, lack of quarterback, I wouldn't put that on him.
It wasn't him. It was Quasi, the former GM.
Yeah.
That fell in love with McCarthy. Yeah. He's probably bordering on the top 5 odds-wise of coaches to be fired first in terms of the odds. We just can't find the odds right now.
I was going to say, it's really interesting going through this list because there a lot of times preseason there you will read a name and be like, yeah, he's probably got like 8 or 9 games. I'm going through this list and I just don't have a good read on who would be the first to go.
Aaron Glenn
is probably it.
Yeah, and I would say Nick Sirianni. I mean, we thought Nick Sirianni at some point 2 years ago was on a hot seat, and then last year at one point. I mean, it just seems like if Philadelphia
that's just the Philadelphia market.
If they don't bounce back with a big season, which by the way, you can't even judge until they get to the postseason, right? Now, if they start off 4-6 or whatever, and at the trade deadline or at a bye week, I don't even have their schedule in front of me. If they're 3-7 or something like that, it could happen, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I consider Quinn's seat to be warm. I don't consider it to be hot. I understand the idea of when you swap out both coordinators in the same offseason, many times that's like, all right, you're getting your wish or we're getting our wish together. Now you got to make it work. I just think the context around Quinn's 2026 is just largely things out of his control. Despite what he told Evan Washburn, which I think is the right answer from the head coach. Head coaches and players in front offices don't talk about injuries. We can do that, and we understand the reality that they are legitimate reasons. And I just would never, unless there's stuff behind the scenes that we don't know. But certainly, the 12-5 in the NFC Championship season, I think bought him at least 2 full seasons minimum. But we'll see. Yeah, interesting. You want to take calls on this? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Describe the temperature of Dan Quinn's seat. Is it cool? He's good. Is it warm? Bad season and he could be in trouble? Or is it hot? Like he better get off to a really good start. He could be in trouble even before the season ends. 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. Don't forget you can watch this show on the Team 980's YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there. Describe Dan Quinn's seat heading into the 2026 season. Jason Lockenfora had over the weekend that he believes the seat is hot, and had an NFL executive say that keep an eye on Sean McDermott next year to Washington. I honestly don't know how reasonable ownership could look at last year and feel a lot differently than they did after 2024. But, even Quinn admitted to Evan Washburn that they were not as desperate. They weren't as sharp or hungry or connected even before all the injuries started to happen. He admitted that in that interview, that he went back and compared an OTA practice from 2024 versus one in 2025, and it wasn't the same. I think these are all very good coaching things to do to motivate, to get them, all on the same page, to get them focused on what, from a football standpoint, from an inside the building standpoint. You don't want players, coaches blaming the obvious. You want them taking accountability and saying we still should have been better, even with all the injuries we had. I would say the seat is lukewarm. I just can't get to hot or even warm. I don't want to say that it's a nothing burger, because I do kind of feel like, to a certain extent, especially the defensive coordinator hire, they better be a decent football team defensively in 2026. He's a defensive head coach. The defense has been absolutely horrible in both seasons, 24 and 25. And if they're back on track offensively, because Jaden's healthy and he's playing, and they're a good offensive team, a top 5 kind of offensive team like they were in 2024, and the defense is terrible again, that's where I think he could be in a lot of trouble, especially if it's, looks ragtag like it did last year. Even, look, they had their best players lost on defense too, with Dorrance Armstrong and Trey Amos and some of the others going down, Dietrich Wise, et cetera. But it also looked communication-wise to be a train wreck at times. You can't have that with a Durante Jones defense if it doesn't look well coached, if it ends up being the reason that they go 8-9 or 9-8 instead of with a really good offense to the postseason. I think that's the reason I'm going to put him in like a lukewarm position, because that could doom him more than anything else. A bad defense again that costs the team. Let's start with Fawad. Fawad, describe DQ's seat heading into 2026.
What's up, Kevin? You took my word, man. It is definitely lukewarm, but I think it's an interesting one. It's not really black and white. There's a lot of gray area. Right now, depending on how the season goes, they're not running Dan Quinn's defense, right? They're running Durante Jones's scheme.
Right.
So if the defense doesn't do well, like you're saying, if the defense doesn't start off well and doesn't play well, is he going to be ruthless and say, screw this, I'm going to go into a self-preservation mode and I'm going to take over? Or is he going to say, well, the defense was bad because we were trying to let Durante learn, and, this is his first time being a DC, and vice versa. If David Blau and the offense struggle, he can say, well, Blau and Jaden, they're getting used to this new offense. It's going to take time. He doesn't handle the personnel. That's Adam Peters. So in reality, we have to ask ourselves, what does Dan Quinn do? Is it just primarily culture, quote unquote, and game day, time and score, timeout, like in-game situations? Is that where we're going to measure him? Because tangibly speaking, we can't really hold him accountable for the offense. We can't now.
Well, we can hold him accountable for the 2 coordinator hires, even if the front office participated. And by the way, again, I think that the hires of Blau and Durante Jones are very different from one another. I think organizationally, everybody's in on Blau. That's not a Quinn thing. It's an organizational thing. I think ultimately Dan Quinn had a lot to do with the hiring of Durante Jones. If that one were to go south and the defense isn't very good from a coaching standpoint, he could be in trouble on that, no doubt. From that, even though it's not his defense, even though, to your point, Fawad, and it's a good one, he is a bit more of a CEO coach right now.
Right. To me, it's like I'm not his biggest fan. I would prefer a football mind as my head coach, whether it's on defense or on offense. Obviously, everybody goes towards offense, but you can win a Super Bowl with a defensive-minded head coach that owns that side of the ball, like Mike McDonald did just with the Seahawks. So, to me, it's just a lot of stuff that's up in the air. So we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out.
I'm with you. My preference has always been I'd rather have a really good offensive mind as my head coach, for the reasons of, good offensive minds get hired pretty quickly, although we've seen a lot of good defensive minds get hired in recent years. And you just pointed out, we just had a Super Bowl won by a defensive coordinator who was hired to be a head coach. And by the way, led by its defense, Seattle was. So, yeah. Bay and DC, describe Dan Quinn's seat heading into 2026.
Hey, good morning, Kev. Kevin,
Hey, how are you?
Thanks for taking my call, man.
Sure.
Man, I don't think that seat hot, man. I think if he have another bad year, it's not going to just be hot. He's going to be gone. I think.
Well, wait a minute. You just said two things, or maybe I just misheard you. You said you didn't think his seat was hot, but you think if he has a bad year, he's gone. No. So that would describe, at the very least, a very warm seat heading into the season, if not hot.
But my reason for saying
he has to produce a really good season, or he's gone. That's the definition of a hot seat, right?
But my reason for saying that is I think his replacement is already on the team. I think this is like a Bill Parcells, Sean, the coach up in Denver. I think that's
Sean Payton.
The situation it was when he was in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And he was supposed to take over as head coach. But
so you think David Blau is head coach in waiting?
I think he is. Especially if he have a great season, I believe he is the guy.
Right. I mean, that certainly wouldn't shock me based on the way people feel about him. I'd like to not jump the gun and see what he does as an OC first, because there seems to be the presumption of greatness as an offensive coordinator before he's even done it day one. I mean, could I see a scenario in which, let's just say offensively, they're extremely good like they were in 2024, top 3, top 4, top 5 offensive football team, and their defense is poor and it's poorly coached, and they end up winning 9 games, but they miss the playoffs because the defense is so bad, and then David Blau gets the job next offseason? Of course, I could envision that. But right now, as we sit here, I can't imagine that Quinn's seat is any more than lukewarm. Subject to change. Ian, go ahead.
I'm going to go just a level above you and go to warm. I think the coordinators, and I heard what you said on Blau, that it's an organizational decision. I think both Adam Peters and Dan Quinn are kind of at the same level. I would put Peters maybe a touch below, like maybe mid-lukewarm, and put Dan Quinn at warm. But I think the coordinator piece is part of it. And also, I would really ask, when you're the CEO coach, there's only so much culture stuff you can talk. And I think at some point we need more tacticians. Like you said, you want to get an offensive guy, Ben Johnson, that type of ilk in there. So I think he's warm. And I've said this to you before. You look at his record, he's one game above 500, and he's been coaching a long time. And I just don't think he's terrible. I just don't think he's good either. I think he is what his record is.
Thank you for the call, Ian. I think that I think Dan Quinn, I mean, when you say he's been coaching for a long period of time, he's had, 7 or 8 years as a head coach, right? 5 in Atlanta, 2 here. I think that's it. Maybe 5.5 in Atlanta. I don't know what his record is. He's been in the postseason 4 or 5 times, though, in those years, right? Here it is. Yeah, I mean, 2020 COVID, he got fired, at 0-5 in that season, but his seasons were 8-8, 11-5, 10-6, 7-9, 7-9, 2 playoff seasons. Obviously, the Super Bowl, big lead lost. against the Patriots, had that divisional round loss to Philadelphia in 2017. They actually had a legit chance to win that game. They won a playoff game against the Rams, against Sean McVay's Rams, on the road in the Coliseum, if I recall, in the first round of that postseason. And then obviously what happened here in 2024. I think Dan Quinn is a solid coach. I certainly don't think he's elite. And I mean, I think that clearly people respect the living hell out of him as a leader. And I think this organization needed somebody like him, especially when they were hiring a first-time general manager in 2024 after the tumultuous, 20-something year period of Dan Snyder. So he's more than served, I think, a very valuable purpose in helping to change the culture. But that only gets you to a certain point, and I do think this is a big year for him. But I think there's a lot of context around it, just like there was last year. I cannot, with any level of thought or heart or any compassion or looking to go on the attack, the opposite of that, I can't put last year on Dan Quinn. I just can't. I put it on it happens to NFL teams. It just does occasionally. If it happens again this year, there will be context around the results again. But, there's a lot more that would go into it at that point. All right, Ben Standig next.
Man, what's up, everybody? I had a great Father's Day. And before I lay down and go to bed tonight, I just wanted to say, go Commanders! Go Commanders, man. Go Commanders. Raise hell, man. Take command. What you talking about?
That was the latest from Brandon Ayuk over the weekend from Nan. Nan writes, Kevin, it's pretty obvious Brandon Ayuk wants to come to Washington. Really, Nan? Did you need that video to actually tell you that? Like, hasn't it been pretty obvious all along? Going back to the 2024 contract negotiation, I think we knew that he would have preferred to have been here all along. Yeah, I don't think that was the big reveal on where Brandon Ayuk wants to play. I think we've had that for a while. But I appreciate that you were more convinced after watching his Father's Day message to Washington fans. Ben Standig's with us as he is every Monday and Friday on this show. He is our Washington insider. You can follow him on X at Ben Standig. You should subscribe to his Substack. Covers the team as well as anybody else does, and it barely costs you a couple of bucks a month. It's totally worth it. I love it. Okay, so let's do the obligatory Brandon Ayuk's latest video reaction. Go ahead.
Did you see this morning he posted a picture of Mark Rippon for some reason?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I don't know
not.
what this. I don't know. It was no caption, no nothing. I had no idea why Mark.
Was that
Rippon.
Instagram?
Yes, Instagram, yes.
Well, I mean, he was our last Super Bowl MVP.
Sure. I don't know. We've had the same. You and I have had this discussion 100 times. I think it all comes down to, is Adam Peters really in on this guy or not? I mean, again, like I've talked about this on my site and here, like all the speculation, all the rumors, and we still really don't know what the Commanders actually think. We can assume that they think, hey, we'll bring in Brandon Ayuk because the quarterback knows him and the GM knows him and they're comfortable. And obviously, if he is right, if he is healthy, he would be a massive upgrade for us at the second receiver. But I don't know how you keep looking at everything he is doing and think to yourself, well, this feels like a good presence to bring in here. And, plus, like, he's, gone out of his way to insult the 49ers, an organization that Adam Peters worked in, knows these people. So it's an incredibly bizarre circumstance. And, I hope for the best for them. But, clearly, as the astute emailer said to you, he clearly wants to come here.
Yeah, I think the only thing, and you said it to me 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago maybe, when you said there has to be something to Washington being interested, because if there weren't, they would have leaked it to somebody just to get their name out of the Brandon Ayuk conversation. Now, does that mean that they're, once he gets released, they're all in? They've already made that decision. It doesn't mean that, but I think at the very least it means that they're going to kick the tires if he gets released.
Yeah, I mean, you would presume so. Like,
you're the one that said that. You said, we don't know anything, but we do know that if they wanted to put an end to their name being attached to him, they could do that. And they haven't done that.
They absolutely could do that. I mean, it could, look, Adam Peters could just be like, I don't chase rumors in any direction. So I'm not saying anything. It's not my problem. It's your guys' problem. But yes, it seems apparent that there is smoke and therefore there is fire to all this. I think there's some people who are still worried they're going to offer him some big contract. No, he's going to. If you see here, it's like 1 year for, relatively small amount of money for a receiver. They do still have a fair amount of cap space, but no, that's an issue. Yeah. Again, if he is right, as you have said, when he was last healthy, he was one of the top 10, 15 receivers in the league, whatever it might be. And that would go a long way towards helping this offense that, has questions at the second receiver. But, I mean, the amount of questions you'd have to have on this is pretty rough. And again, for an organization that, again, all we ever hear about is culture this, culture that, what it means to be a Commander. I don't know how many boxes he checks, but it can't be all of them. So I don't know. I don't know how you're justifying this. We'll see. I think.
Yeah. I mean,
yep.
that is like, all right, we're going to kick the tires. We're going to have him in. We're going to, he's going to sit with Adam first. He's going to sit with Dan. He's going to sit with Josh and Mitch, and Magic might even come in for this one. And they got the list and they got the boxes next to each one. It does seem like checking every box is a long shot. The question is, what kind of stomach would they have for, say, 4/5 or 3/4 or half of the boxes being checked, especially if you don't really have to stick your neck out contractually for them?
Coaches will always say, or at least these are the stories that you always hear of, like, there are rules for the team, but the rules don't apply. Some of the rules don't apply to everyone. In other words, if you're the best player on the team, you can maybe get away with a little bit more than the 53rd guy. When T.O. was at his, sort of, whoa, what's going on with this guy mode, he was still arguably the best receiver in football. And that's the rub here.
Well, we've seen that at that position over and over again over the years. I mean, Antonio Brown, was just flat out uncheckable for those years. Tyreek Hill was getting in trouble all the time, but was the most feared player in the game there as a non-quarterback. Yeah.
Right. So it'd be one thing if all this is happening and you're getting a guy coming off a 1,200-yard season, but he hasn't played since 24 and coming off a knee injury, and he looks healthy, I guess. I mean, I know the 49ers reporters said he looked fine when he was running around there last season before he went MIA during his rehab. But yeah, that's the rub. It's just like it is so hard to believe that he is worth all this unless you're telling me he is. It doesn't have to be a Pro Bowler, but he is a legit starter. That's where the Adam Peters part of this is going to have to be huge. You're going to have to read that part. Is the juice worth the squeeze? And from our seats, it does not seem like it.
Right. From our seats, but we just don't have enough. The one thing we do have is we have all of these videos in which really the vast majority of the messaging has had nothing to do with him being a pro who's claiming that he's in shape, healthy, and can't wait to get back out to play football. And that's the only thing that he's thinking about. And that's where, anybody advising him, and maybe they are and he's just not listening, but it's like, be a pro. Like, if you're going to communicate how badly you've missed football and how you can't wait to get back out onto the field, and you are healthy and you've been cleared by doctors and you're in shape and you're going to show up for training camp ready to go with the 49ers. And then, see what happens from there. But that's not, there's been the image, and certainly I think what we've been left with is a vision of somebody who seems to be a bit off.
I would just say, at a minimum, follow T.O. and do sit-ups in the driveway.
Exactly.
At least do that.
Yeah.
Just so that you're doing something.
Right. I got this. I'm looking at it because I got it on Friday. My guy Seth in Potomac wrote, Kevin, one of your callers really pushed you on the lack of a true number 2 wide receiver and why Adam Peters hasn't done enough. With Ayuk still in the picture, why isn't another Jaden former teammate talked about more? Isn't Jacksonville still trying to trade Brian Thomas Jr.? We have talked about Brian Thomas Jr. We talked about Tyreek Hill last week. I've talked about Keenan Allen. I think that's, probably what they see in Burks and maybe somebody else. But Brian Thomas Jr., just so everybody understands, he had a dreadful 2025 off of a very, very promising rookie season. And on a rookie deal, not even midway through his second season, the team that employed him reportedly wanted to trade him. And then on top of that, they didn't trade him. Maybe because there wasn't a lot of interest. Maybe because they were asking for too much. Then there were reports that they were going to try to trade him before the draft. This, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago now. And that didn't happen. So, yeah, Brian Thomas Jr. played with Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and was incredibly prolific in 2023 on that LSU team with Jaden, his Heisman Trophy winning season. But there's clearly something here that doesn't add up. Why would you trade A guy in the second year of his rookie deal after the rookie season that he had, which was outstanding. He and Malik Neighbors were the two best receivers, rookie receivers in 2024. The big issue, by the way, I meant to get to this, sorry, Ben, is that he dropped a lot of balls last year. He had a 6.6% drop rate last year. That's twice the average for a high-volume receiver in the league in 2025. And his catch rate last year was the 5th worst among high-volume receivers. And all of his drops were on in-breaking over-the-middle routes. And so that's why, there's got to be something more to that, why they would trade him or want to trade him. But the push from some of you on Brian Thomas Jr., yeah, I loved him as a rookie too, but why would Jacksonville want to trade him? Don't you? Yeah, you have to ask that question whenever a player that is good, great, or super intriguing and young is on the trade block. Why would the team want to trade him?
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe have talked yourself into saying, okay, well, they acquired Jacoby Myers last year, then signed him to a new deal, and he's a pretty good receiver. They drafted Travis Hunter last year with the number 2 pick, and yeah, he's going to play corner as well. But hey, look, if he's going to be one of your main receivers, all right, maybe you can get away with trading Brian Thomas for stuff. But it sounded like Travis Hunter might be playing a little bit more corner than receiver. Well, I guess we'll see if that plays out. I know the coach has sort of denied that, but okay. And so based on that, if you're telling me that Travis Hunter is not going to be, full-time receiver, which, he's not going to be, then Brian Thomas is no less than your number 2 guy. Look, as somebody who had him as a fantasy keeper last year, I was very disappointed. And you're right, the year was really shockingly poor, especially considering that Trevor Lawrence had arguably his best season in the NFL. So something odd is going on. But I'm with you. I don't quite get it why Jacksonville would move him. And here's the other thing, right? Assuming you trade him for draft picks, now you have to wait until 2027. Right,
of course.
So
let me just also mention, Jacoby Myers was traded for at the deadline last year because they were so disappointed in Brian Thomas Jr. So and he and Parker Washington became the top 2 receivers for Trevor Lawrence on a team, let's not forget, that went 13-4 or 14-3 last year, something like that. And I think played in the best playoff game start to finish, the loss to Buffalo in Jacksonville in the wild card round. But wide receiver watch, Ben, until basically at what point, if they haven't added one of these wide receivers that have been mentioned, do we come off of wide receiver watch? Do we have to wait until the opener? Do we have to wait until week 2? When does it happen? I guess if all these guys sign with other teams.
Yeah, I think everybody else has to go off the market. Yeah. I mean, Noah Brown showed up here after final cuts, and he immediately became number 2. So, and that's a guy who's good, but not obviously at the level of some of the guys we're talking about. So yeah, I think it's going to be a long wait. I mean, even if somebody in training camp or preseason, looks like a bit of a breakout, it's hard. Somebody would have to make a big leap. Maybe that's McCaffrey or Lane, or maybe Antonio Williams just comes in hot. But it's hard to see any of the vets like all of a sudden turning into a dynamic starter. So yeah, I think we'll probably have to wait until everybody's off the market, or Washington starts the season and it's like, okay, Jaden is turning these guys into legit receivers the way he did in 2024. So yeah, we're gonna have to wait for sure. And if it's not Ayuk, if we're not playing that game, and this is not reporting, I do kind of buy that they're fine with what they have. And I think in part because if they're going to use more 2 tight end sets, I think we can see a world where Chigga not only is the number 2 in targets, but plays a bit more outside. I mean, they'll use them all around the formation, but they can use him as that big target outside, too big for safeties and corners, too fast for linebackers, all that stuff. So I think that is an alternative that the outside is not accepting yet. And they may be like, well, we think we're okay.
Well, look, Zach Ertz was the number 2 targeted, pass catcher in 24 and in 2025, and he missed games. So, and that was with a lot of 11 personnel. So it's very obvious with what they're likely to do that Chigakonkwo was signed to be a major, targeted pass catching tight end in the offense that they are going to employ. All right, I wanted to get to Dan Quinn. I don't know if you saw this or not, whatever is like in terms of the importance of it, but it is June 22nd, and it provides us, a segue into a conversation about Dan Quinn. Jason Lockenfora wrote over the weekend, citing league sources, that Quinn's on the hot seat. And that, part of it is just the indication when you swap out both coordinators, it's like your ass is on the line for these changes, and we know what they were last year. In fact, there's somebody who mentioned to Lockenfora for the story, a longtime NFL personnel exec, who said, quote, "Keep an eye on former Bills head coach Sean McDermott there next year. Just remember who told you first," closed quote. By the way, you can't remember who told somebody something first if they're going to say it on the condition of anonymity, in terms of how we read it. But how would you describe, I did a call segment last hour, how would you describe Dan Quinn's seat heading into 2026 using a temperature description?
First off, if you are gonna move on, I would put it at, this is just my view,
2% that it's a defensive head coach.
Yes, exactly. You have James Daniels, and you're going offense. Right. But okay, whether that's David Blau or somebody else. Anyway, look. I mean, I think we have all kind of believed in this, era of football where you just don't have a ton of time to get things going. That after how poorly last year went, that sure, if they have another underwhelming season, I can see Dan Quinn being let go, or the fall guy, or what have you. I said that whatever Durante Jones and David Blau turn into, we'll see. But part of the reason they went with 2 guys who were first timers, in Blau's case had minimal coaching experience, period, is because I think people who had options were not looking at Washington favorably, because there's some question about how long is Dan Quinn definitely there, right? I mean, say what you want about some other teams. If you're hiring a brand new coach, even if you're a bad team, let's say like the Arizona Cardinals, well, in theory, that guy still at least be there for 3 years. So you could, from a life perspective, you're good here, you could get let go after a year. So I mean, to say he's on the hot seat, I think is overstating it significantly. But I think it's realistic to say if they have 6 wins, whatever. Maybe it's not even the number of wins. Maybe it's just they can't get blown out by 20, 30 points on a regular basis. Then, yeah, sure, it would make logical sense that they move on. But I don't think he's on the hot seat. Like if you don't immediately, he's going to be in trouble. No, I don't buy that.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, lukewarm to me. Of course, things change, but as of today, I've said this a million times. I just don't know how any reasonable owner or general manager could look at last year and say that was all on the coach. I mean, he's on a short leash after that season. I mean, it's just you can't do that to a coach who lost all of his best players for the course of the season, even though he admitted, and you and I talked about this, I think, on Friday with Evan Washburn, and I had Evan on the show as well, that, they weren't, as hungry. They weren't as desperate from the beginning portion of the year. We don't know how that would have played out had their players stayed healthy. It's a great coaching angle and something for them to work off of, because they're not going to make the excuse, which we can make, which is their best players didn't play. All right. The entire offseason work schedule of OTAs and minicamp and camps, plural, is over. The next time we see these players, it'll be the beginning of training camp, which will be the end of next month. So is there anything like legitimately substance-based that you think you learned after, 9 OTA days and 5 minicamp days, rookie and veteran minicamp days?
By the way, it was just announced literally a few minutes ago. Rookies have to report on the 24th, the vets on the 28th. So we have some specifics there now. big takeaway.
The season's a later start. I was actually wondering about when they would all go to camp because it's a later starting season, because Labor Day is as late as it can be. And so the opener's not until September 13th. The first preseason game, I think, is actually the second weekend. It's like August 14th. So I was wondering if they would still end up reporting to camp because that's kind of a regular time, right? The 24th, 28th.
Yes. That's about when it starts.
So they're going to get more work in prior to their first preseason game, as an example, than they have in recent years. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to the point of the Quinn hot seat conversation, as bad as it was last year, there was no real signs of the locker room fraying, right? Even despite all that, and I do think that's important, and I think that carried over into this offseason. I mean, the amount of players the new guys who were raving about Quinn or anybody on defense, really excited about Durante Jones, when you could see their eyes light up.
Right.
So, until they get on the field, that's kind of all we have. But I do think these things are important because I've covered teams where you can tell they're just like, to some degree, like when Bieniemy was here, you can kind of tell, and then things blew up. They were like, I don't know if this is going to work for us. So I just think in general, Blau and Durante Jones have passed the "do you believe in them" test, right? So I think that is key. The defense is obviously limited in OTAs and minicamp in particular because, no hitting, no contact, things like that, no pads. But what Durante Jones told us about it's not where you line up, it's where you wind up. I said this to somebody earlier. When Ron Rivera got here and the Riverboat Ron moniker, we're all expecting constant fourth downs and you're going for it. And it really never actually played out like that. The Riverboat moniker was semi-fraudulent based on what we actually saw. I don't think that line of it's not where you line up, it's where you wind up, that is legit based on what I could see. I mean, can't get into all the specifics, but like they're going to have guys coming, into the pocket from all over the place. And I think, for a team that was 31st last year in turnovers, 32nd in yards allowed, to have at least put the other team on their heels, be aggressive. You're going to get burned at times. Yeah. I mean, look, if the pass rush doesn't get there, there are questions at corner, but I do think that they're going to be much, much, much more aggressive, and they have the personnel to do that, even without Dorrance Armstrong and Tim Settle and Dietrich Wise in camp because of injuries. It looked like they had a lot of dudes. I won't go full Javon Kinlaw and express colorfully what the kind of dudes they have, but but yeah, I mean, I think to me that was probably the biggest takeaway is just I can see conceptually where they're going. It matches what they've been saying, and I don't think it's overstating to say that they should be vastly improved. I mean, I don't know if that's a top half of the league defense. I don't know how all these guys are going to work against the run, but in terms of getting after the quarterback, it should be a lot more. I mean, look, Dorrance Armstrong was like the only pass rusher they had last year, and now even when he comes back, he might be the third guy just on the edges. So, they have much more options, more athletic, and I think that aspect of it is probably, one of the big takeaways for me.
I hope you're right, man. I really hope you're right, because that was painful last year. I thought it was painful at times in 2024. And this year, I mean, you've got Dak twice, you've got Stafford, you've got Burrow, you've got, who am I forgetting on the schedule? I mean, obviously Hurts in the division twice, whatever. But you've got arguably two of the best 3, 4, 5 quarterbacks in the game on your schedule this year. You've got Darnold and what they did. What'd you say? Sorry.
Yeah, no, the Super Bowl champs. Yeah.
Yeah, the Super Bowl champs. So you just got to be. It's hard. Like I think about that Cincinnati season from 2 years ago, when they had a horrendous defense, but offensively, Burrow had a phenomenal season. And they went 9-8, and they missed the postseason. In many ways, I don't know if it would have been 9-8, maybe it would have been 8-9. But if the offense had stayed healthy and the defense had stayed healthy last year, I think that's the kind of season, because of how bad the defense more likely than not was going to be, even if healthy, they would have been in for. So you got to be improved on that side of the ball when they get to Philly in September. Man, every time I pull up that schedule, I hate playing the schedule game. I never do. but at Philly, at Dallas, Seattle for the first 3 before going to London is daunting to say the least. But we know how these things work. It's not who you play, it's when you play, and we'll see what happens. Real quickly, because I do have to get to a break, but I'm just curious here because I won't have you on tomorrow. Who do you think they'll pick, and who do you want them to pick tomorrow night on the clock? The Wizards at number 1.
Yeah, I kind of wrapped up my draft looks today. I had the story up about how there's so many people out there who want to tout Cameron Boozer because of the analytics, but I didn't talk to the world, but I talked to 10 different sources. All of them were pretty split, DeBonsa or Peterson as the top guy. To me, without knowing Peterson's story, what exactly happened last year, what was the true explanation, DeBonsa's size, athleticism, and also the fact that he's an alpha scorer and an alpha personality on a team that doesn't have either, not counting Trae Young or Anthony Davis, because who knows what their future is here.
Mm-hmm.
I just think he checks too many boxes. So to me, DeBonsa's the pick. I think that's who they will take, and I think that is who I would take based on what we know. So yeah, I mean, it is wild to think about that. Essentially, the Wizards this offseason will have added Trae Young, Anthony Davis, and the number 1 pick. That is wild, on top of having 6 recent first-round picks, who all of whom look to be at least reasonable players, if not much better. So the Wizards' turnaround could come pretty quickly, and if DeBonsa hits, then they have their star among their young guys.
I am, if it's just about basketball and Darren Peterson and all of the stuff, they can check the boxes on all of those things. I've come to the conclusion, Ben, that if Darren Peterson had a normal college basketball season at Kansas, we wouldn't even be talking about anybody else other than him at number 1. But
right. Well, that's why the background is going to be so important on this one. What do they actually feel about him? What actually went down? Because that's just the big mystery. Even listening to people who cover college basketball, right? They're like, I don't know. So that's not good enough. But they know more. We just don't.
Thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, man. See ya.
Ben Standing. Up next, Adam Finkelstein is the director of scouting for CBS Sports 24/7 as well. He is a draft expert. He'll jump on with us when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com. NBA draft tomorrow night. The Wizards have the number 1 pick. They traded for Trae Young. They traded for Anthony Davis, and now they'll add the number 1 overall pick to a roster with a lot of first-round picks on it already. Adam Finkelstein is the director of scouting and covers the NBA, college basketball, and the draft for CBS Sports. We've had him on the show before. He's excellent. At Adam Finkelstein on X. So play Dawkins, Winger and Company. You've got the choice for the Wizards tomorrow night at number 1. Who do you take and why?
Yeah, I think I'd probably go with Bonsa. I think he's the combination of the highest ceiling, but also with a pretty high floor. I will say I was happy to see that they, reporting came out this week that they also had Boozer in. I know the discussion has been largely around Bonsa and Peterson, but I truly believe this should be a three-player discussion, and Boozer should be involved in that. But at the end of the day, Bonsa is someone who I think legitimately has a chance to lead the NBA in scoring one day. I mean, he's a prototypical big wing. He's 6'9". He's got a 7-foot wingspan. He's athletic. He's got this elasticity type of bend about his frame that is rare. He's got physical tools that could and should translate defensively, although it really hasn't happened yet. And there's also untapped upside if he becomes a more reliable three-point shooter. But, we're talking about the leading scorer in college basketball last year, someone who's going to be able to come in and be a hub offensively from day one. And that's regardless of who else is around. I know right now it's a little bit of a different context with Trae Young and AD, but, I do think that Bonsa in the right context would be capable of being somebody's, alpha scorer right away next year.
All right, so I think you've already led into what your answer would be to this next question, but I've suggested that if Darren Peterson didn't have all the smoke around him that he had at Kansas, and he had a normal, in terms of minutes played, games played, one college season in Lawrence, that we wouldn't be having the debate right now that Peterson would be the number 1, but it sounds like you disagree with that. Tell me why.
No, we're more aligned on that than it may sound. I mean, actually, Peterson was the one that I had at number 1 coming out of high school last year. And what I have said is that the shot making that he showed this year at Kansas was beyond anything that I could have imagined. So there's an element to his game, a really important element that's way better than we could have expected. And I thought he was the best to begin with. But I do think that everything else, the injuries, the cramping, the illness, the quite frankly, the lack of quality answers in the pre-draft process. I mean, there are some holes in that creatine story. There are some holes in some of the responses he's had. I asked him myself at the combine. I said, when was the last time you were 100% healthy? And I was fully expecting him to say, before the season started, because the version of what I saw on the court at Kansas, even in some of his magnificent moments where he was putting on a shot-making show, lacked the same aggressiveness and assertiveness and rim pressure that we saw in high school. So I was really, candidly, I thought I was throwing him a softball. I just thought that no one had asked that question yet, and it was important to document that what we saw was not the 100% of what we were expecting. And, he said, there were some first halves when I felt like myself. And so then I'm thinking like, well, why didn't you play the same way we played in high school? So I think it's a combination of all of the issues that we had during the season, as well as, quite frankly, just poor answers to what should have been very predictable questions, not by me, but by NBA decision makers here in the pre-draft process.
You're more plugged in than any of us. And I guess where I'm struggling with it is, are they through this process going to be able to check off all the boxes of areas of concern with him? Or is it leading to, there aren't going to be enough those boxes checked strongly enough, and it's too much of a red flag and they're going to have to pass. And I'm talking about obviously Washington, but maybe even Utah. Do you know where these teams are? Because obviously this has been the single biggest discussion point with him. They've got to get answers to these things. You did imply that maybe some answers weren't good enough at this point, but do you think there's any chance that, let's just say, Winger and Dawkins here in DC are like, all right, we're satisfied with all the answers. We're where we need to be, and now we're just evaluating the basketball stuff?
I do think that's a possibility, but I think that in order to be fully satisfied, if it were my career that were on the line, because if I'm, if you're Winger or Dawkins and you take Darren Peterson and these issues persist, and you pass on AJ DeBonta and Cameron Boozer, that can significantly alter the course of their executive careers, because revisionist history is alive and well in every draft cycle, and everyone will look back and say, you should have known. How could you have passed? Because the opportunity cost is really high as well. And so I think if I were them, this would be number one about the medical, which is pretty cut and dry. And what I will tell you is today we've heard about some red flags today alone with a couple prospects in the lottery, but really not with Darren Peterson. And remember too, in the new CBA, multiple teams have access to that. They get it at the combine. The thing that I think most teams looking to make an investment of tens of millions of dollars, which is what we're talking about in the number one pick, I think a lot of teams, and this isn't talked about as much, whether it's a personality assessment or a psychological deep dive, like a lot of teams do a lot of that sort of work as well. And candidly, that's what I would want to know. I would want to know how mental was this issue? If this was, and this isn't speculative either. He actually said this. If you go back to that first story he did where he talked to Ramona Shelburne from ESPN, that was the creatine story. And the creatine was supposed to be the big takeaway from that story. But buried under that headline,
the emergency room visit.
Yeah, and he was talking about how that was in the back of his mind.
Yeah.
And every time he started to cramp up a little bit, he got nervous. That to me is the red flag. It's not about whether or not, like, any NBA team in the association is going to be able to figure out the cramping thing. It's how mental did this become for you, and are you past that part of it? Because unfortunately, there are some examples of mental hurdles really derailing careers over the course of just recent NBA history. So that's
Markelle Fultz had that clear issue with shooting, but what we're talking about here is an anxiety thing where he was so traumatized by that emergency room visit, because right when you started to say that, I read that too, and I'm like, this guy thought he was dying in September, if it's 100%. True, and that he's got to clear that hurdle of, we're going to fix that, and you're never going to be faced with that again. But it really is it's a mental health thing.
And I think it's also like a physical health thing for him. I think the medical workup was probably just as important for him as it was for anybody else, because he talked about like concerns that he was having a cardiac issue,
right?
And the fear of like having that issue play out in front of thousands of people, not to mention national TV. Like, that's a lot for any 18, 19-year-old kid. Forget about the age, for any human being to have to deal with. So I think a lot of this is like, I think people are missing the target here. And I've heard it boggles my mind that we're still talking about competitiveness. I've heard that like come up in the recent, and I'm like, come on, are we just not paying attention at all here? So those are the questions that I would want answers to.
I think, I mean, as you were describing it, and I remember reading that, this really could be the crux of the issue. Like, he's got a real anxiety related issue over his physical health, which, that they've got to figure that out. Obviously, that becomes more of a psychological thing that he's got to overcome. Real quickly about him as a player, and I've tried to describe him as a player to a lot of my listeners who aren't paying attention during the regular season in college basketball and just start to pay attention now. I can't remember watching somebody that scored with so little perceived effort. It was so smooth. Like, I compared it to like DeMar DeRozan, the way he scores, the way Kawhi scores. Somebody texted me earlier saying, because, George Gervin's the all-time effortless scorer, in my opinion. But do you agree with that? And do you have like a basketball comp, putting all the other stuff aside and the reasons he might not get picked number one, who do you compare him to?
So I think your point is one that I've heard NBA scouts make, because obviously this was a discussion over the course of the season. And the thing that, and I remember this very vividly, it was a pretty high ranking scout. And this was in January. And I said, like, how much are you, how do I want to phrase this? How much are all the availability things pushing off you at number one for him? And the answer was actually, at the time, it was kind of just the opposite, because even like I saw the explosiveness, I saw the physicality, I saw the creation in high school. And even though he doesn't have those things, he's still having, outbursts like the first half against he had when he went head to head with Bonza.
Yeah.
So I think when you combine those things, what I would tell your fans is if they watched every Kansas game this year, they probably don't have a full appreciation for him, and they should just go on YouTube and Google his top highlights from high school. And then when you merge that with the shot making you have this year, that's the basis of the upside. So, whether it's somebody like I've tossed around like a bigger Tyrese Maxey, there's some Devin Booker there, different, and those are different comps than I would have used in high school, because in high school I would have said, like, as I said, I never thought that he would be this level shot maker. And so if this availability stuff never happened, if he was, I think that this would be a much different conversation, as you alluded to earlier on.
We are talking to Adam Finkelstein, CBS Sports, Director of Scouting. He's all over this draft. So after those top three, and you want Boozer considered in the top three, give me sort of a list of your favorite players. Let's just say the next three, the ones that you're most confident are going to work out in the NBA.
So Caleb Wilson is a firm 4, right? Like, okay. I think that he's, I think there's a big 3 of this draft, but there's also a big 4, because I think he's probably closer to 3 than he is in 5, in my opinion. And yet still, whether it's Peterson or Boozer, that should be a third pick, whoever Utah doesn't take, presuming Devonta goes 1. So I think Caleb Wilson is the next guy. After that, there is this group of 4 freshman point guards that makes it really interesting, because I can't remember a time when we had, potentially 4 one and done freshman point guards. And that does not include Peterson. Right. We're talking about Keaton Wagler and Michael Brown and Darius Acuff and Kingston Flemings. And how did those guys not only compare and contrast to each other, but how do they fit the respective franchises they're going to be drafting there, beginning with the Clippers team at 5 that just traded for Darius Garland, another kind of undersized point guard last year. So that, I think, is another really intriguing storyline of this draft. And it's also riddled by some of the medicals for those point guards are complicating their stock. So those are other big storylines going into tomorrow night's draft, and we'll see if it has any bearing on where those players are picked.
By the way, I think Caleb Wilson's closer to 1 than he is to 5. I think he's got that killer in him, and he just looks the part to me. Like, I really like Peterson, but all the other stuff is a concern. And I do Bonza, but man, I think Wilson in a lot of drafts would be really like number 1 overall in a bunch of the recent drafts. Well, not recent drafts, the stretch of, prior to Zion, when we had a bunch of question marks at number 1.
Well, I think it's safe to say Atlanta would trade Risa Shea.
For sure, for sure. So you gave me the point guard conversation, but you didn't tell me the order in which you'd put them.
I have. It would be Wagler, Acuff at the top. Some of that is contextual. I think if you're the Clippers, you can't really pair Acuff with Darius Garland, so Wagler would be my pick at 5. Acuff, I think, is the most prepared to come in and put points on the board right off the bat. So he would probably be next. Michael Brown is the guy who's got the widest range of potential outcomes, because his upside is this late bloomer who's grown 8 inches over the course of the last 4 years, who's probably the most naturally skilled with the ball in his hand, who's almost ambidextrous. He actually prefers to not only pass, but also dunk with his left hand. And he's a much better shooter than the numbers showed this year at Louisville, in large part because, candidly, took way too many bad shots. So you combine all that and there's a significant ceiling, but he's also someone that the overall impact at Louisville wasn't what we expected, has been to 4 high schools in 4 years, has some concerns about durability with a couple different back injuries. So there is a wider range of outcomes there. Kingston Flemings is someone who was way better than we thought last year at Houston, despite the fact that he was a top 20 recruit coming out of high school. His shot is still very unorthodox, or, funky, let's just put it plainly, and yet it went in. So, are we banking on that continuing to happen at the NBA? He's not as big. His frame is a little more slight, so there are some concerns there. I think at the end of the day, my order would be, as I said, contextual at first. I think Acuff in a vacuum, but Wagler for the Clippers. I'll summarize it that way. Then probably Flemings, and then probably Brown, just because of some of the uncertainties around him.
All right, last one, and I appreciate the time. So the Wizards, there have been reports that they may try to get back into the latter portion of the first round. Give me a player or two that you really, really like and think is being tremendously undervalued, and it'll probably go second half of the first round or later.
So what I will tell you there is that I think that's a harder question than I expected it to be 2 months ago, because so many guys went back to school. I mean, we're talking about, we have to prepare a 2027 or like early mock for CBS. Yeah. And I think there were like 13 guys who would have had a chance to be, at least in the first round discussion this year, who went back to the NIL market. So what is close to consensus is that the draft is not as deep as it once was. And some of those teams at 29 or 30 have described those picks to me as almost negative assets, meaning like they are attached to a guaranteed salary that you might not want to pay to who's available at 29 or 30. So I think if the Wizards have somebody that they like, there might be an opportunity there available. If I had to speculate about who that would be, I think the supply demand of the point guard position could allow you to get a really good prospect later on. We already talked about Peterson. We already talked about the 4 freshmen. Beyond that, there's still LeBaron Philon, Bennett Sturts. I'm forgetting somebody. Ibuka Okori, Christian Anderson is who I was forgetting. So now you've got Tech, 8 or 9 guys who I think in most drafts probably are top 20 candidates. And I just don't know that there will be that many teams that need a point guard in the top 20. So if you're Washington and you're saying like, hey, who's next up after Trae Young, that may be a potential target at the end of the first round that makes sense if Sabonsa's your pick at number 1.
All right, I lied. I got 30 seconds. Give me the player that you're convinced will be overdrafted.
Yikes. Oh, man. I don't know. Nate Amos.
Yeah.
And I love the kid. I love the kid as a person, so I hope I'm wrong. Let me also say that.
Thank you, Adam, very much. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Adam Finkelstein, everybody from CBS Sports. Lots of draft talk tomorrow. Your chance to weigh in as well. Nick Ashew sitting in for Chris. He's next.